Good morning, everyone. It seems like you guys could not hear me. I was going along just fine, and I'm not sure if you heard Susie either.
Oh my goodness. I am so sorry for that technical issue. I know it's 15 minutes late, but should we start again?
We're just gonna start again. Rock and roll. And so sorry, guys.
I'm so sorry, Opal.
That's okay. I'm going to introduce myself real quickly. I'm Opal Ringo. You guys should remember me from last year. We had a couple of presentations together. I'm back again to share some information about the new individual financial profile and which is the in-home subsidy request. It's new. It was implemented last year in December, along with with Rule 65G-13. You all should have gotten notification of that. Public notices. We have public notices on APD's website regarding the new rule, and the IFP is attached. And now we're following up and helping providers, helping waiver support coordinators to know, hey, let's take a look at this new IFP and start using it. We're phasing out the old IFP. The old IFP will be phased out from APD iConnect shortly. And this is just a part of our move to the new document. Okay, I'm going to try to move pretty quickly, guys. The objectives today are just to learn how to complete the new IFP and submit it for an in-home subsidy if an in-home subsidy is needed. We talked about the background on the in-home subsidy, kind of sharing that information first so we're all on the same page. It is a type of financial assistance APD may provide to a client who's in the supported living in their own home. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that phrase, own home, later. And the in-home subsidy is based on the needs identified in the IFP, and it's got to be with supporting documentation. So that's what it is. There are two types. There's the monthly and the startup in-home subsidy. And a person may be approved for one or the other or both based on their needs. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about the purposes and uses of the IFP, the rules and requirements, how to complete it, how to upload it to APD iConnect, and if you need to submit an in-home subsidy request, we'll be talking about that as well. And then we'll save questions and answers to the end. You can add your questions into the chat, and we'll get to them as much as possible. And we may offer a little bit of time over for questions after the session is over for those who want to get out on time. We apologize for our technical issues. So you'll be able to get out on time, and we'll just save those questions for a little bit after the session. I want to just point out to you that you have a control box on your screen, and part of the control box, you'll see where you can ask questions, and there's also handouts. There's a field that says handouts. If you click on that field, the little arrow, you're going to see the handouts for this presentation. I went over them briefly. There's a copy of the actual presentation, so you have it. There's a submission steps handout, so you can see how to submit the IFP in iConnect, and I'll go through that later. There's some resource links. The actual IFP is attached along with the rule that we're going to be referring to, the rule that is connected to the IFP, and also a resource link, the link to the supported living provider library on APD iConnect. So all that's there. I also showed you the supported living coach service delivery documentation checklist. That's there. It is a helpful tool for supported living coaches, but it's just there for your knowledge as well. So we're going to get right into it. The purposes and uses of the IFP. The IFP is used for three purposes. One is to identify the client's budget for housing and living expenses. Waiver support coordinators, typically on a quarterly basis, you all are looking at that IFP and looking to see how well the client's doing in their budgeting. You're just there to make sure that there aren't any issues that are coming up, because we want to ensure that clients are living in their home and they don't have any financial circumstances that are going to prevent them from continuing to live in their home. So those are some of the things that you would be looking for. Supported living coaches oftentimes will assist the client with budgeting. They may not be their fiscal agent all the time, but they may assist them with helping them to maintain a household budget, helping them to maintain their finances so that they don't have any issues with their benefits and things like that. So that's the first purpose. Moving in startup costs, when a person first moves into their home or prior to, those startup costs are calculated. There's a section of the IFP that can be used for that. It's very helpful. There aren't many documents that really help people to understand budgeting for that moving and startup costs. So that's a great feature of the IFP. And the last feature is that the IFP helps to identify if there are any shortages in the client's budget. So if there are any shortages in their housing budget or their living expense budget or their startup cost budget, the IFP will help to identify that. And that's where we as APD may come in to provide financial assistance to clients if it is needed and if they meet certain qualifications that we're going to go into. So the rules and the requirements, they're in the APD budget handbook. So we're going to talk a little bit about the APD rules and requirements, and then we're going to talk about the Rule 59G. Well, not 59G. Rule 59G helps us to know that everything that's in the APD, the iBudget handbook, is required. It is a rule. So anything that's written in the handbook is something that providers should be in compliance with. So I just want to say the iBudget handbook is part of the rules. And then in addition to the iBudget handbook, this new rule from last year that just came about, Chapter 65G-13 on individual and family supports, that rule or that chapter has rules for using the IFP to request an in-home subsidy. So that's where you will find that information, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. iBudget handbook requirements for the IFP. These are things that you all probably already know, but I just want to touch on a few quickly. The supported living coach's responsibility is to assist the client with completing the IFP. That is stated in the handbook. They have to submit it to you, the waiver support coordinator, within 10 days of the onset of supported living services. So as soon as they become the client supported living provider, that is the first document that they submit to you as WSCs. Now it's submitted in iConnect within 10 days. They also have to update the IFP once the client selects their housing or anytime their financial situation changes. And I wrote that this way because there seems to be confusion about when and how often the IFP needs to be updated. So I want to give you this rule of thumb. It must be updated to match where the person currently is. At a minimum, once a year, right? It's updated once a year and it's reviewed quarterly. But the point is that the IFP should always reflect where the person's finances are. Some people have very fixed finances and they may not change very often. They get a fixed income, they have their fixed living expenses, and that's about it. And it may remain that way throughout the year. When you guys review it, maybe on a quarterly basis, you might not see many changes. They may not have any changes to report. And then that means that at the end of that year is when you go through it and you review it and revise it. However, it must be kept current. It's like a living document. So I wanted to make that clear, because sometimes it's difficult to understand, well, what is APD saying with deadlines and you know, the language, what is it saying? The intent is that IFP reflects where that person currently is. That's the intent. And then with you as waiver support coordinators, the requirements that are in the iBudget handbook state that if a person is receiving an in-home subsidy, that you should be reviewing the IFP quarterly to verify it accurately reflects all sources of income and monthly expenses. So that's a requirement. And secondly, if a client is in supported living and does not have a supported living coach and receives an in-home subsidy, you're going to be doing it quarterly. It says at least quarterly, but you're going to be doing a little bit more in depth, because you're going to have to do the part that the supported living coach normally does. The waiver support coordinator will sit with the client and look at, okay, let's look at your financial statements and put all of that information in there. So instead of it just being a general review, you're going to be doing a more in-depth review, more hands-on. And that's a requirement if a person has an in-home subsidy. Both of these are requirements. If a person has an in-home subsidy, it's that quarterly review is required. When it comes to clients who do not have an in-home subsidy, it's not written in the handbook that is a requirement. However, it is the best practice that you are reviewing that client's budget just to make sure that you're helping the client to maintain their benefits, you're addressing any issues. We don't want them to have any emergencies where they are put out of their home. So keeping an eye out for their budget is a best practice for WSCs and for supported living coaches. It's something that, as you saw on the slide before, it is a requirement for them. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity of the requirements versus the best practices. Okay, now let's get into chapter 65G-13 that I've been talking about. This is the chapter on individual and family supports. Now what that is, there's a certain type of funding that APD receives. It's not Medicaid waiver funding. It comes from a separate pot of money. It's our general revenue funds, along with, I think it's called the Social Security Social Services Block Grant Funds. And that money is used to provide temporary assistance and to meet critical service needs of clients. So these are funds that we use a lot of times when our clients need assistance. They may need crisis assistance. They're in a critical situation, and if they're not on the iBudget or on the CDC Plus waiver program as of yet, they're in pre-enrollment status. They may need assistance and they don't have that waiver funding. This money is used for that. This funding is used for clients who need an in-home subsidy. So that's like our clients in supported living who run into a difficult situation where they cannot pay for their housing, and the money is used for that. But I just wanted to emphasize that it's a different pot of money and it's limited. It's not like the Medicaid waiver funding, and that's going to be important to know as we get a little bit further into the presentation. Okay, so if you look at chapter 65G-13, this is the outline on the right hand side of your screen. Is the outline of the chapter. So it has the definitions and it has the IFS procedures and IFS criteria. Those two things we're not going to talk about. It doesn't really apply to our topic today, but we are going to talk about the in-home subsidy procedure, the in-home subsidy criteria, the restrictions, and then the review process. So those parts of the chapter, those rules will apply to our discussion today. The rule, and most of the rules, they start off with a set of definitions. And when you have time, I'm not going to go into this in depth. The definitions, these are a few of them, but there are several definitions within the chapter. take a look at those definitions and become familiarized with them. Today, I just want to point out a few. The difference between a family home and a person's own home. Like a person's own home is where they live in a supported, what we refer to when we're talking about a supported living setting. When a person lives in their own home, they get to choose it. They rent it or own it in their own name, so they all have the lease. They control it. They occupy, they live in it as their primary place of residence. That is their own home. And the home has to meet HUD qualifications, HUD standards for quality, which is what our initial housing survey is based on. It has to, it cannot be a licensed residential facility, and it cannot be a family home where they're living with their family members. This is the whole intent for supported living is the person is establishing their own home within the community. So that's an important definition. The definition of fiscal agent is also in there. Some of our supported living coaches may act as fiscal agents for clients. So it's important to understand what does that entail. Imminent serious jeopardy, when the funds are used, they're used if a person is in imminent serious jeopardy. So think about that when we're talking about that in-home subsidy funds. It's for crisis situations, okay? In moving on down within Chapter 65G-13 to the in-home subsidy procedure. So to get one of these in-home subsidies, a request must be made by submitting an accurate and complete IFP with required supporting documentation. So those are the key words here. The WSC submits IFPs for waiver clients. And this is something that has already come up in questions. The WSC, you are responsible according to the rule. So the supported living coach, they submit the IFP to you. But if you're submitting, if a person needs an in-home subsidy, the WSC is responsible for moving that IFP forward to getting that subsidy and doing it within a timely manner. So that's your responsibility for our waiver clients. For clients that are not on the waiver, a supported living coach may do it, may submit that IFP directly to their waiting list support coordinator or pre-enrollment coordinator now. They may submit that directly, but for most purposes here, the WSC will submit the IFP for any clients that are on the waiver. If a client is signing SLC, here's the SLC's responsibility. They have to help that client to draft and gather documentation for that IFP. They support them with that process. And they also support the client by helping them to find other funding sources within the community. APD is a payer of last resort, and these funds, like we said, they're limited. They're for crisis only. So if there's any funding available to that person, besides the in-home subsidy, APD will be looking at the documentation that's provided to see that the SLC and the client has made a diligent effort to find additional funding sources. And then the SLC, they're going to submit that complete IFP to you as a WSC no more than 10 calendar days. This is the first one, following the selection of housing by the client and prior to signing the lease. So this is in cases where, okay, we're helping a new client helping a client move into a new home. They don't have enough money to move into the home. They're going to need financial assistance. So that means that in those cases, we got to move fast. The SLC is moving fast. They're submitting it to you within 10 days. Okay. They're submitting to you within 10 days. And then you as a WSC is turning around and submitting the IFP to the APD regional office within 7 days. So we're trying to get that approved so that we can help those clients move forward and get into their homes. APD is going to make a determination whether they approve it, deny it, partially approve it, whatever they do to the IFP, they're going to make a determination within 30 calendar days, or they're going to ask for additional documentation to supplement the request. That's important to remember. You want to make sure you have all of the documentation you need to support it so that APD doesn't have to turn around and ask for more documentation. APD is going to issue a notice of determination to the client and the client's legal representative if applicable, if the person has one. So if the in-home subsidy is approved, what's going to happen is the client is going to get a notice that's going to indicate here's the amount you're approved for, here's the time period that you're approved for, and here's specifically what you can use this money to do. Okay, that's what the notification is going to say if it's approved. If it is denied, the client can, they have a right to request an administrative hearing within 30 calendar days. So important to note, APD must review and approve the client's IFP for an in-home subsidy before the client can commit to a living situation that is beyond their financial means. So what that basically means is the client doesn't need to move into a home assuming that they're going to get an in-home subsidy. They need to know that APD has approved it. They need that notification to see exactly what APD has approved before they get into a situation where they can't afford the housing. So that's an important note. As we talked about before, with the in-home subsidy criteria, the funding is limited. It's limited to basic living necessities. This is like emergency funds. It's like APD's safety net to help clients that are in a crisis situation. So it's going to be basic living necessities that help that client to remain in supported living in their own home. And as I mentioned before, they are funds of last resort and will only be granted when all other resources have been exhausted. So here's what a person needs to do to qualify for a subsidy. They've got to be 18 years of age or older. They must either need it to move into their home or remain in their own home. They must establish that living in their own home is in their best interest, the client's best interest, does not jeopardize the health, safety, or welfare of the client or others, and is more cost effective than other options. So if we really, again, are looking at the financial situation and whether or not providing these funds, the client is demonstrating that this is the best use of APD's support and financial support to help them, and this is the best use of it for them, that they need to remain in their own home. And they also must have a current written lease signed by the client and landlord that is not prohibited. We're going to talk about prohibited leases in a minute, but these are the criteria how a person would qualify for an in-home subsidy. So now for a prohibited lease, these are leases that are short-term leases, like the month-to-month leases, and any fixed term that is less than 1 month, like moving them into a hotel efficiency type not apartment, but a weekly rental, that is not considered a supported living setting. It doesn't meet community standards for housing. It's for permanent residents. It's temporary. So with the month-to-month leases, unless the client's circumstances are such where maybe in a certain community or certain area, this is the way leases are structured. It has to be very specific circumstances as to why a person would be able to be allowed to have a month-to-month lease. That lease is not usual. We want to help people to establish their own home, not a temporary spot. That's not the purpose of the in-home subsidy. So it won't be approved. The subsidy will not be approved if the financial need is based on the mismanagement of their money. So if they've got an issue with managing their funds, that's not a valid reason for the in-home subsidy. They will not APD is not reimbursing startup expenses. That's why we were saying we want them to wait to receive that approval. And then APD may not provide a subsidy if the funding is not there. Like I said, this pot of money is limited. And I just want to go back to the top bullet real quick and say that it's very important that we help our clients with their financial management and gaining management skills, developing their own emergency fund, their personal safety net. Every person should have their own emergency fund. Every person, it's a basic financial rule of thumb, is to try to save up 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses, so that if you have a financial emergency, you have the money available. And I know some people are saying, well, there are issues because a person can't have more than $2,000 in their savings account, but we have those ABLE accounts where clients can set aside more than $2,000 and it won't be counted towards that SSI and those and Medicaid. Make sure that you are using all of these resources, that your clients are using all of these resources in the community to set themselves up and not have to be so concerned with every single emergency, because emergencies pop up in life for everyone. And so we want to make sure that the clients have that. And by the way, I recently heard that ABLE is ABLE is providing a $25 match. You can start an ABLE account this month. So it's like with $25 and they're going to match $25. So that's just something, if your clients aren't taking advantage of those type of resources, we want to make sure that they do. Okay. So in-home subsidy restrictions, restricted items include mortgage. And like you see, all of the bullets on the left-hand side of the screen have to do with a person's actual home. If they own their own home and they have property taxes and, you know, they need to repair and maintain their home, this again, a person needs to start having an emergency fund to set up for those type of expenses. So those are all the expenses on the left. And on the right, these are some additional expenses that APD won't cover, like loans, technology expenses that are not considered a necessity, those kind of things. So those are restricted. APD can review any in-home subsidy for compliance. So this is what may happen if a person receives an in-home subsidy. APD may come in and take a look and say, okay, let's see how they're using it. Let's look at the receipts. Let's look at make sure that they're using it according to the approval notice. And if requested, the client receiving the subsidy, they must provide an update to APD within 10 calendar days of the receipt. And the supported living coach and WSC, you both are responsible for helping to ensure that those funds are used exactly as they are designed to be used according to the notice. If they get notice that they're approved to purchase a certain item, for example, maybe putting money towards their apartment, then that's exactly what that money should be used for. And if it's not used in that way, then the WSC or supported living coach, you all should notify APD about if there's any issues, any unapproved uses, and help to take action to address those issues. So this is important. This is part of the verification process. You all are a part of it, looking at verifying the use of it and the verification that you're doing. Document it in the progress notes and say, hey, we ensured that the client used the money just as stated on the notice. The supported living coach or waiver support coordinator shall reassess the client's need for an in-home subsidy on a quarterly basis or more frequently if necessary to determine the client's ongoing need for the subsidy. So you guys want to monitor the finances to ensure that that person still needs that subsidy. And if their circumstances change, you guys should submit a new IFP as soon as you're aware of the need of the change.
Opal, could you mention some of the changes that could occur that would necessitate a new IFP?
For example, a person might lose a roommate or gain a roommate.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there might be a situation where they lose a job or gain a job. Just any situation where their finances change and they may need an adjustment. They may need more or less of the in-home subsidy and support from APD. Okay, let's go to how to complete the IFP. I'm going to open it up for us to take a look at it. Okay, first I'd like to say the instructions to the IFP are right on it. They're on the first page and at the top of most sections, and there are footnotes. So pretty much this document is self-explanatory. There might be, if you have a question, you can always contact your supported living liaison in your region. You can contact us directly. We're going to share our emails at the back of this presentation. But the document itself is pretty user-friendly and self-explanatory. I'm going to show it to you. Here it is. Make sure you read the instructions, right? Especially here, IFP it clicked over. IFP instruction, it tells you which parts to complete based on what your client's needs are at the time. So that's what it says on the front page. It tells you what to do about an in-home subsidy request, what kind of documentation you would need to support your request. It's all on there. Okay, so this is the first section. There's no additional information at the top, but this is each section starts off there by Roman numerals. This is basic information. Monthly income. You'll see there's a little bit more instructions here. Always read the instructions for the section before you complete it. And if you do that, you're probably not going to have any issues. So far, the only question I've gotten was like here where it says select IFP type. If it's this is your first time doing it, it's an initial IFP. If not, it's either a quarterly reassessment or you're just updating based on a change. If the person has a change in income, you can review the IFP at any time, but the only time you need to update it if the person has a change in their income. So that's what these refer to about the IFP type. And then here, a question was asked, this IFP reflects the following for the client. Check all that apply. If none of these apply, don't check any of them. This is not a document where you have to fill in every single blank. You do not. You only click on the things that apply to your client. You only fill in the pages that apply to your client. So here you'll see the amounts. When you enter amounts, they're going to total by themselves. You'll see a little blue spinning wheel, and you might even see where it says read only word is not responding. Just wait a second. It's calculating the amount and it's filling it in more than one space. You'll see throughout the document. I'll show you a little bit, which is why it takes a minute. It's just doing the math. And so anywhere you would fill out the document, if the person doesn't have a live-in personal support provider, you don't put anything there. You only put information where you need to, where if they have roommates, you would add up how much rent those roommates are providing and how much rent the client is providing. So you just fill it out where it is, and you'll see this section gives you more instructions, and it also has some footnotes down at the bottom. So just follow the instructions and the footnotes, and in the subtotals will tally themselves. Another helpful feature is where you see this is for APD use only, so you won't be using this. This is for use when an in-home subsidy is needed. but it shows you what's not allowable. So now you can see, here are the things that may be allowable for an in-home subsidy, but we know that a television service, that APD won't be paying for that. So that's helpful. So we don't have to go back to the rule and say, well, wait a minute, which things are allowable and which not, which aren't. It's already embedded in the form, and you know. Any questions? It explains certain things down here, like personal supplies and items. It tells you what they are, what it's referring to. If there's any question about anything, it's all in the form. And you see what I said earlier, where I entered $100 for the total monthly income. It fills out here. This whole section 4 completes by itself, so you don't have to complete this at all. You just fill out sections 1, 2, and 3, and 4 will complete itself. And I also want you to know, like, if you're filling out the last part of this section and you click the tab over, it's gonna skip this whole page, the whole next page. You see where it says read only. It skips the page because you don't have to fill it out. It's filled it out for you. And you go down to, it just goes down to the next page, okay? So that's basically it in a nutshell. We try to make this form as user-friendly as possible by making it where you can tally it up, you know, from your computer. You can sit with your client and tally it up. The supported living coach can sit with the client, tally it up, print this out, and have it available for the quarterly meeting where you all can sign it. Remember, it's the supported living coach's responsibility, if the client has one, to sit with them and gather all of this data and complete this document. And they should have this document printed out and ready for that supported living, from that quarterly meeting. They should have it printed out and ready. You can review it as a waiver support coordinator, and all of you can sign it at that time once your review is complete. Okay. All right. So when you're completing the document, I bolded the sections that you will always complete on the quarterly basis. You're the basic information, the person's income and expenses, and section 4, which basically completes itself, and the signature and certification page. Those are always completed. Sections 5, 6, and 7, they're only completed when needed. 5, when there's startup expenses, which only happens once, hopefully, with a client. And 6 and 7, well, 5 and 6 is startup expenses, and 7 is in-home subsidy request. If an in-home subsidy is needed, that's when you would complete that section of the document. Okay. Technical space, I said, leave any spaces blank that you do not enter NA. Don't enter anything in there so that the document can tally, calculate, just leave it blank. The fields in section 4, they're going to auto calculate. You don't have to complete it. And the spinning blue wheel means that the form is calculating. It's not, there's no problem with the form. It just takes a second. You can just wait. Okay. So please take a look at it, read it. If you have any questions, please email me after this presentation, or anytime that you have any questions about the instructions of the form, you can email us. Like, you could also email your liaison as well. Okay, now let's get into how to upload the IFP to APD iConnect. I'm going to go over this quickly because we are coming up towards the end of the presentation. And I also want to say that supported living coaches, I went over a little bit more in depth with supported living coaches during that training because they're not as familiar with iConnect as you all. And I want you all to know that we've reviewed how well the supported living coaches are submitting their documentation in iConnect. And we're noticing that about 50% of supported living coaches aren't uploading information to iConnect at all. So if you have clients that are in supported living, please make sure that the documentation that supported living coaches are submitting to you, the required documentation, that they're putting it in iConnect as they're supposed to. Because that's the client's record that we all have access to, so that we're part of, APD is also a part of the client circle of support. And it helps us all to know what's going on with the client when their records are available. So please ensure that they've moved online as they're supposed to. You could help us with that. We would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to go over this a little bit quickly. So there's a different process for uploading the documents. If, whether you're a supported living coach or a waiver support coordinator, they're similar but not the same. So supported living coaches, they're going to upload it as a note to you. They're going to, if they upload the IFP, they're going to get it signed. They upload it as a note, and it comes to you as the waiver support coordinator. It's going to be, the note is going to be called supported living. That's going to be the note type. Individual financial profile as the subtype, and it's going to say signed IFP. So you should be looking for those in the client's file. You should be looking to get it on your main page. It should come to you because you should be the note recipient. That's their process. If you see step 5, they select the client's WSC as the note recipient. You should be receiving that from them after the quarterly meeting or after it's completed. And so that's their process for uploading. I have that listed here, but I'm going to scroll through quickly because your process is a little different. If a person doesn't have a supported living coach, or you're the person that is uploading the client's information to iConnect, you're not going to load it the same way. It is going to still be called, the note is still going to be a supported living as the note type, the individual financial profile as the note subtype, and signed IFP, but you're going to select complete as the note status. They have to select pending because it has to also come to you, and you should review it. You're the last person to see that IFP unless it's going on to an in-home subsidy. Okay, so that's the difference in the process. You all are pretty familiar with the steps, but here are the screens to lay out, getting to the notes, to add a note. Here's how it's labeled, how the note is labeled, like I just described in APD iConnect, and you attach the signed IFP here. Now let's go to how to submit an in-home subsidy request. So here are the steps, they're laid out. And I'm going to let's look at the images. So when you go into the client's file, you're going to see, or the consumer record is the correct word, but you're going to see, okay, here's the note, here's the supported living individual financial profile, signed IFP, that's created by the SLC. You'll see that note there. It's going to be, and here's what you're going to do to the note. You're going to change the note type, the note subtype to in-home subsidy request, the description to subsidy request, and you'll submit it to the region, and you'll place the status in pending for the region's approval. And the person that you submit it to is going to be the name of the regional staff member who reviews in-home subsidies. Okay, so let's say if you're in the southern region, I believe it's Roland Bertram. I believe he reviews it. So you're going to add him, click on that button. You're going to add Roland as your note recipient. You're going to, of course, you're going to add the IFP there. It should already be there. But then you're going to, your last step is save and close. This is a process that you all are very familiar with. The only difference is making sure that we have the right note type and subtype. I'll go back here. And the reason why we want the right note type and subtype, when you start filing, when there's so many different notes, you can easily go through and see, okay, here's what I'm looking for. you can see the notes quickly. So we want to make sure that you upload and use the right type and subtype for the notes. And that is all for that. Talked about those processes, and it is 12 o'clock noon. Susie, I want you to go ahead and just tell them about the test, and then afterwards we can get into questions. We'll take about 15 minutes to answer some questions.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Just letting you know that I am dropping the link to the test into the chat right now. You can go ahead and access that. If you miss it for whatever reason, all attendees should be getting an email in about an hour. If you do not get either one of those or have some issues, please feel free to email me or Opal, and we will get everything worked out as we can.
Okay. All right. Well, one of the biggest questions that we always get is, what if a client refuses to provide financial information to complete the IFP? Well, if they are getting an in-home subsidy, they have to provide that financial information. So that's not a choice that they can make if they're receiving that subsidy. But if they are not receiving an in-home subsidy and they refuse to provide that information, if you're completing it, or the supported living coach is completing the IFP, either one of you all, make sure you complete it with as much information as you know. Still have the client sign the document, and then you're going to follow the process of uploading it to iConnect. You're going to add a note in APD iConnect, and it's just going to be a different note type. Let's take a look at it. Supported living is going to be IFP refused. Okay, so just make sure that you put it as that. And I also want to state that it's really important that we help clients to understand the importance of the IFP, why it's used. You know, we're using it to help them to make sure that they're managing their budgets, to give them any type of support in that area, to identify if an in-home subsidy is needed, to identify if their benefits are being maintained, such as SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare if they have it, just making sure that we're looking at their finances to see that they're sound, and we're there to offer that support. And so if clients begin to understand that, and even if they're legal representatives, they'll see us more as partners, which is what we're really trying to do, is to keep so many financial emergencies from happening. And we want to share resources like we talked about ABLE earlier, making sure that they can get an ABLE account and being able to save for emergencies and things like that. So these are some of the things that we can offer them. And we hope that we don't run into this situation very often. Okay, so that's our number one question, but I just encourage you to emphasize the importance of this with your clients. I'm leaving our emails up in case you have questions and I don't answer them right now. You can email us. Ken is my supervisor. He's on the line as well with us. Susie, of course, she is the queen of waiver support coordination, our liaison, who does a fantastic job. So please contact any of us. We're here and available to support you with these questions. Okay, I'm going to take a look at any that you have. Someone attended this training yesterday and they said, will this count as another training? No, it's the same, pretty much the same information. We had a lot of questions about sound. I'm so sad about that. I'm sorry about the sound. Okay. Okay. You guys bear with me. I'm still scrolling through the sound questions. Okay. Says, please tell us, when did APD start giving subsidies again? The last we knew, they stopped years ago. Ms. Brooks, Kent, you might be the best person to answer that. It was my understanding that it did not stop, but Kent might know historically.
Opal, yeah, I don't think we've ever really stopped issuing subsidies, in-home subsidies. I think what has happened is we have really clamped down on making sure that individuals are eligible for that. But the monies that have been allocated for in-home subsidies, we're continuing to receive that IFS funding. So we never really stopped.
Okay. We got several questions about handouts as well. If you don't have access to the handouts, you can't find them, I will, you can email me or Susie and we will send them to you, but they should be available from your control panel. Hopefully you're not on the phone, If you're on the telephone, you're not going to see them, but if you're on your computer and you've got this webinar open, there's going to be a little control panel. The same place where you're asking questions, where you said, I don't see them, the handouts should be right underneath there. And they're all in there. But if you still don't find them, please email. The emails are up. You can go ahead and shoot it to me and I will email you after the presentation. Someone is saying, are WSCs going to be paid for SLC services we are now required to do their job? Well, no, the WSCs are not going to be paid for SLC services. The only time a WSC is doing an SLC's or work that might be considered supported living coach work would be if the client doesn't have a supported living coach. The supported living coach is going to be completing the IFP. The only thing that WSC would have to do when it comes to the in-home subsidy is review that the SLC has submitted the IFP and forward it on to the regional person. So you're just changing the note type and you're sending that IFP to the regional person. You just have to make sure of that. And also, the part of the WSC's responsibility in supported living is monitoring. That quarterly process has always been the waiver support coordinator's process of monitoring. A lot of times the supported living coaches end up doing some of those activities. The supported living coach should prepare for the monitoring, but essentially on those quarterly meetings, it is up to the WSC. It's almost like you're ensuring that the supported living coach has done their due diligence. That's what it's all about, or part of it anyway. You're ensuring you're just looking at the finances. You're looking at all of those things. They're in page 2-90 of the iBudget Handbook, the requirements for the quarterly meeting, and those have always been under the waiver support coordinator. And there's a list of things that you all do. So please take a look. One of the handouts says SLC service delivery documentation checklist. So that tells you these are the responsibilities of the supported living coach. And that document, I'm going to pull it up again. Okay. Here's the title. This tells you all the things that they do. And quarterly home visit meeting documentation. The WSC is responsible for that, conducting quarterly meetings to monitor supported living service. Here's what the SLC must do to prepare for that. They've got these things to do to prepare. They've got to document attendance, their attendance at the quarterly meeting. But you as the WSC, you facilitate the meeting, make sure that certain things are done. Like I said, it's in the iBudget Handbook under your section 2-90. So there's that. Hopefully that's helpful. Sometimes I know that there's been some confusion over who does what. I think it's important to understand that it's a partnership. Like we're kind of a circle. We're a circle around the client. The WSC facilitates, coordinates, and monitors. The supported living coach provides training and coaching to help the individual live as independently as possible in their own home. And the WSC monitors to ensure that that client is getting the service adequate and sufficient services. If we are newer WSCs, how can we determine if a client currently has an in-home subsidy? You should not, if you're a new WSC, your client, I'm trying to think how that would even be possible for you not to know. It would probably, Kent, where would that information be? That would be in the client's file if they have an in-home subsidy, and the WSC would be able to review it. It should be in their file. Is that correct?
Yeah,
they should have a notification.
Yeah, you're talking about in a situation where a person does not have a supported living coach and they have an in-home subsidy? Is that what you're saying?
The person says that they're a new waiver support coordinator and they don't know if their person has an in-home subsidy.
Well, when reviewing the documentation, they should be able to find out whether or not the individual is the recipient of an in-home subsidy. I don't see a situation where a new support coordinator wouldn't know that, wouldn't be able to ascertain that information.
Yeah, I think that there's a notice that's sent and it would be in the client's file.
Right.
It probably would be in their record as well, their iConnect record as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is the WSC responsibilities effective now or to come regarding WSC acting as SLC when they don't have an SLC? If a client doesn't have an SLC, the WSC has always been responsible for certain activities. And I believe it's in your handbook on either page 103 or 102 about what does the WSC do when a client doesn't have a supported living coach. So, I mean, you're not gonna fulfill the role. You're not gonna complete like the functional community assessment, the implementation plan, things like that are relative to the supported living coach's job. But you will have to monitor, their finances a little bit more in depth. You're gonna have to take a look at that APD health and safety checklist. You're still going to have to do certain things. And I don't have it in front of me, but it's in the handbook. Yes, I do. Hold on. Let's pop open the handbook. Because this is not new. I think it's very important that for whatever service area that you're working in, if you're a waiver support coordinator, please become very familiar with all of the sections of the handbook that relate to your job. It's in 2-103, I believe. I'm almost there, guys. I hope I'm not hurting your eyes. Okay. Here it is, responsibilities for recipients in their own home not receiving supported living coaching service. And this has been a responsibility. It's been in the handbook. When a person lives in their own home and does not receive supported living coaching, the WC is required to visit the recipient inside the home to ensure health and safety standards are met and that the home meets acceptable standards as outlined in the APD housing survey. So you're going to do the housing survey. You're going to review the health and safety checklist and the financial profile quarterly. So it's listed here, the things that you would do. Okay. And if you find that your client actually really needs a supported living coach, maybe you should help them, you know, talk to them about that. Because if you're finding that they aren't able to do the things that are needed to live as independently as possible with just maybe a personal support provider and they're in supported living, you might want to talk to them about what a supported living coach has to offer. Usually in the situations where the client is in supported living and doesn't have a coach is because they've gotten situated in supported living, they've had all the coaching they need, and the waiver support coordinator, you kind of take on the responsibilities when the client is stabilized. That's probably the best situation. But if you're noticing when you go and you're doing some of these activities and there seems to be a lot of issues popping up, maybe it's time to talk to the client about that, about a supported living coach. So that's something to think about. But let's see, it's at 12:16 and I'm going to stop here, guys. I see there are like a couple of more specific questions. If you would like to email me for follow-up, you can email me, and I'll try to go through this list and answer any other questions to the people directly. If your email address is available to me, I believe that it is. Susie, with these questions, aren't I able to get the email address as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'll follow up with the questions that I wasn't able to answer with a direct email to you. And if you don't hear from me by Monday, then email me directly. Okay. So I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your patience with us during the audio issues. You have a blessed day. Bye-bye.